Hi, Year 9. I hope that you're well and that your families are all safe. I'm going to be doing some of the online learning lessons with you. So today, what we're going to focus on are the key ingredients that you need to write a persuasive magazine article. But just before we do that, I'd like you to have a look at the 5-a-day questions. So these 5-a-day questions focus on politics, and all of this information ties into today's lessons. So what I'd like you to do is to spend 5 minutes trying to answer them. So grab a pen, piece of paper, and give it a go. Okay, so welcome back. So the first question was, what is an MP's job? Now, an MP's job is to represent their constituents in the House of Commons. An example is that Mick Whitley is the MP for Birkenhead. The second question is, what happens in the Houses of Parliament? Now, the Parliament looks at what the government is doing and they make new laws, and they also have the power to decide how much tax people have to pay, and they also debate issues of the day. Question 3 is, at what age can pupils vote in the UK? Now, you have to be 18 years old to vote. The fourth question is, where can we find articles about politics in the UK? So you may have had answers like newspapers, magazines, online. You might even have some other examples that I've not put up on the screen. And the final question is, name a person who became politically influential as a teenager. So there are two people that I put down. Malala Yousafzai is one of them. So she's very active for fighting for girls' rights to have access to education. And we also have, of course, Greta Thunberg, who is a very vocal activist concerned about the environment. So well done for giving that a go. So your task for the week is to write a magazine article where you will express your views about the following statement. So the statement is, politicians don't listen to teenagers. We should have teenage MPs represented in the Houses of Parliament. So what we'll do in today's lesson is I'm going to go through all the information that you need before you can then start writing your magazine article. So just before you start writing your magazine articles, I've got a couple of questions that I'd like you to think about. And what these questions will do is that they will prepare you for the thinking that you need when it comes to planning what you will write. So one of the first questions that I'd like you to think about is, why in this country you have to be 18 years old to vote? So what is special about the age 18? The second thing that I'd like you to do is have a look at the statement again. So it's at the top of the screen. Politicians don't listen to teenagers. We should have teenage MPs represented in the Houses of Parliament. So I want you to have a long, hard think about this. Do you agree with this statement or do you disagree with it? And I want you to think of a couple of reasons why you do or why you don't. So what I'd like you to do is pause the video for a few minutes, have a good old think, jot down some notes, and then we will move on. One of the reasons why 18 is the age when we can vote is because that's when we become adults and we're considered to be responsible enough to be able to decide who it is we want to run our country. Now, the second thing that I'd like to look at, and this is quite important for your article, are arguments that agree or disagree with the idea that politicians don't listen to teenagers and that there is a big need to have teenage MPs in the Houses of Parliament. Now, a reason why somebody might agree is because at 16, you're old enough to pay taxes, you're old enough to fight for our country, but you're refused the right to vote or have a say in how the country is run. Now, this is quite a strong reason to agree with the statement. Now, I'd also like us to consider a reason why we might disagree. So somebody might say that at 16, pupils have not yet achieved full emotional maturity, and because they have limited educational and life experience, perhaps they're not quite ready to make such a big decision. Now, it's important to consider both sides of the argument when you're writing an article. what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to add 2 of your own arguments to each column. So you're going to use some of these ideas in your own article, and I'm more than happy for you to base one of your arguments from the list, but make sure that if you do one of the 2 arguments on the screen, you write it in your own words and that you expand on it and you explain it a bit more. And in addition to that, I want you to come up with one argument of your own, because I'm really interested to see what you think about this. And that's very important. Okay, so when we write any kind of article, there are 3 things that we have to consider. Now, the first thing is the context. So you need to think about what is the situation that we need to talk about. So that's really important. Second thing we need to think about is the audience. So who is going to be reading your article and how do you know that this will be your audience? The third thing that you need to think about is the purpose. So what is the purpose of the text? Why are you writing this article? Okay, so the 3 things that we need to consider before you write your article. First one is context. So we know that the situation that you need to write about is the need for teenage MPs in the Houses of Parliament. The second thing is the audience. So it's likely that your readers will be mainly teenagers, and because this is a young audience, your writing should be informal. So when we talk about informal writing, think about how do you speak to your friends or to other teenagers and compare it to how you speak to adults or maybe your teachers. If it's informal, the language is a bit relaxed. Third thing is the purpose. So we know that the purpose of this text is to argue for or against the idea that because politicians never listen to teenagers, that there should be teenage MPs in the Houses of Parliament instead. So whilst you're writing your article, I want you to have a look at these key ingredients, which I would like you to include. So the first thing that I'd like you to look at are the clear opinions. So when you're writing, make sure you're using short and to the point sentences, because this is going to help you make clear what your position is. So for example, the youth deserves to have their voice heard. So this is short, to the point, and it's very powerful as well. The second thing that you need to include are reasons to support each opinion that you give. So for example, if you think that the youth should have their voices heard, the reason why you might give is because if people aren't engaged in politics when they're younger, then they're less likely to vote when they're older. So the third key ingredient I'd like you to include in your article is emotive language. Now, emotive language is really important in terms of getting a reaction from the reader. So emotive language is when we're using words that are deliberately designed to make the listener have strong feelings. So this could be positive or negative. So in my example, I wrote, "It is disgraceful to cruelly deny young people a political voice." So the words disgraceful and cruelly really make it clear what my opinion is on this issue. So disgraceful is incredibly negative, and therefore it's more likely to create that response in the reader or the listener. So in addition to this, the fourth key ingredient I'd like you to include is alliteration. So alliteration is when words start with the same sound. So we often see it in newspaper headlines and it's used to grab the reader's attention. So for example, "Let us lead the land we love." So this is powerful. The use of alliteration, it gives the statement impact and it's more likely to be remembered. So a quick recap on the key ingredients I'd like you to include in your article. So make sure you've got clear opinions, you've got reasons to back up your views, alliteration, emotive language, and of course, remember to include at least 2 reasons to support your viewpoint. So here's a quick recap of your writing challenge for this week. have fun with this activity. I'm really looking forward to see what you come up with.